The luggage by the door was already packed. Not by me. I want you to hold that for a second. Because when I walked into my own kitchen that Saturday morning and saw 2 suitcases standing against the wall with printed tags already attached, my name, my address, a departure date 4 days away, something in my chest went very still. Not scared, not angry. Still. The way you go still when you're a bookkeeper and a column isn't adding up and you haven't found the error yet, but you know it's there. My son Terrell was smiling at me from across the counter. His wife Candace was standing just behind his left shoulder, hands folded, also smiling. The cruise brochure was on the kitchen table next to my coffee cup, open to a photo of a blue ocean and a white ship. "Mama," Terrell said, "you deserve to rest." I looked at those suitcases. I looked at my son. I picked up the brochure, and on the back, stuck to the glossy cover, was a yellow sticky note in Candace's handwriting. 14 days. Underneath that, circled twice. Enough time. I smiled. I told them it was the sweetest thing anyone had ever done for me. I meant neither of those things. Stay with me. Because what I found on that iPad later that night changed everything. My name is Dolores Faye Whitman. I am 71 years old. I worked as a bookkeeper for the Atlanta Public School District for 34 years. I balanced budgets for 17 principals, 4 superintendents, and 1 school board that couldn't find its own receipts with both hands and a flashlight. I am not a woman who misses things. Terrell is my younger son. He is 43. He has his father's forehead and his father's laugh, and, I have learned, a talent for arithmetic that only works in his own favor. He moved back into my house on Clement Street 3 years ago when his second business venture, a meal prep delivery service, ran out of road. He called me on a Thursday night. His voice was tight in the way it gets when he's holding something he doesn't want to show. I said, "Come home." That is what mothers do. He came. Candace came with him. I had met her at their wedding 4 years before that. A small ceremony in Piedmont Park, late September. The kind of day that makes Atlanta feel like it was designed by someone who loved you. She wore a dress the color of heavy cream. She was organized and precise, and she moved through a room like she was already rearranging it in her head. I noticed that. I didn't say anything about it. In the beginning, it was fine. We were careful with each other the way people are when they're still learning the rules of a shared space. I cooked on Sundays. Candace kept the living room neat. Terrell fixed the loose step on the back porch I'd been meaning to get to for 2 years. We watched television in the evenings sometimes, the 3 of us, and it felt like something workable. That was the first year. The house on Clement Street is not fancy. I want to be clear about that. It is a 3-bedroom brick ranch in the West End with a front porch that needs repainting and a backyard that is mostly taken up by a fig tree. Raymond planted the spring after we moved in. Raymond was my husband. He passed 11 years ago, a Tuesday in November, fast and without much warning, the way the men in his family tended to go. We bought this house together 36 years ago. The mortgage payment back then felt like a boulder we were pushing uphill every single month. When Raymond died, the boulder didn't get lighter. But I had worked my whole life around numbers. I knew which ones mattered. I picked up Saturday work during tax season for 3 years running. I skipped vacations. I packed my lunch every single day. I paid off that mortgage myself. My name is the only name on the deed. I know exactly where that deed is. I have known where it is since the day we signed it. I retiled the kitchen floor myself the summer Terrell turned 16. I planted the rose bushes along the front walk. I painted every room in this house at least twice. The light that comes through the kitchen window at 4 in the afternoon lands in a stripe across the floor that I have stepped over or into for 36 years. And I know exactly what it looks like in every season. On Sunday mornings, I used to put on Raymond's Marvin Gaye records, the vinyl ones, not a playlist, the actual records, and cook a full breakfast. Biscuits from scratch, smothered pork chops, cheesy scrambled eggs, candied yams if I felt like it. The whole house would smell like butter and something warm, and for a few hours, everything felt the way it felt before. That house is not just where I live. It is 36 years of one woman's work made into walls and floors, and a fig tree that smells in the late summer, like the whole yard is exhaling. Candace's mother, Beverly, started coming around in the second year. Dinners at first. That was fine. Then weekends. Also fine. And then one Saturday, I went to use the hall bathroom, and there was a pink toiletry bag sitting on the back of the toilet tank. I picked it up, set it on the shelf under the mirror. Didn't say a word. A few days before the cruise was announced, a contractor came to the house to look at the garage. I was in the kitchen when I heard voices out back. I looked through the window and saw Terrell walking the perimeter with a man holding a clipboard. They were measuring. I waited until the man left. I asked Terrell what that was about. Just getting a quote, he said. He was already looking at his phone. A quote for what? Conversion. Maybe. Nothing decided. He didn't ask what I thought. He used to ask what I thought. That was the thing. It wasn't any one moment. It was the accumulation. The pantry rearranged. My name dropped from the streaming account? Billing consolidation, Candace said. Terrell starting sentences with we were thinking in a way that didn't seem to include me in the we. Small things. Specific things. A bookkeeper notices specific things. So when they presented the cruise, I was already paying attention. 14 nights. Caribbean ports. A balcony cabin. Shore excursions already selected. All of them, already selected, printed on a color-coded itinerary that Candace slid across the table to me with both hands like she was presenting a proposal. It's your retirement gift, Terrell said. Long overdue. I retired 3 years ago. Just for me? I asked. Just for you, Mama. You deserve solo time. Time to decompress. We'll hold things down here. Candace was looking at her water glass. I thanked them. I held the brochure. I asked one question, the one that had been sitting in my throat since I walked in and saw those pre-packed bags. Who packed the suitcases? I did, Candace said. Quick, smooth. I know how you like things folded. She does not know how I like things folded. I have a system I have used for 40 years. But I smiled and said that was so thoughtful. That night, I couldn't sleep. I came downstairs at 11 o'clock and stood in the dark kitchen for a while, listening to the refrigerator hum. The iPad was on the counter where it usually sat. I picked it up to look up the cruise line, to see the reviews, to do what I always do, check the numbers. The screen came on. An email thread was already open. I don't know if someone forgot to close it or if God simply decided I had earned the right to know. Either way, there it was. I read it once. I read it again. I set the iPad back down on the counter exactly where it had been. I stood there for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the fig tree was dark against the back fence. 36 years of work. One woman's name on one deed. Enough time, the note had said. I went back upstairs. I lay down. I closed my eyes. And I slept. Because I had work to do in the morning, and I have never once been able to do good work without a full night's rest, I should tell you about Raymond. Not because this story is about him. It isn't. But because you need to understand what I was standing in the middle of when all of this happened. You need to know what the walls of that house meant before you can understand why I did what I did next. Raymond Alton Whitman was a quiet man, not cold, quiet, and the kind of man who listened all the way to the end before he spoke. He worked for the city water department for 28 years. He coached Little League on Saturday mornings, even after both our boys aged out of it. He made the best pan-fried catfish I have ever eaten in my life, and he knew it, and he was not above being a little smug about it on Sunday evenings, when the whole house smelled like cornmeal and hot oil and something good. We met at a church picnic in the West End when I was 26. He asked me if I wanted the last deviled egg. I said yes. He gave it to me and didn't take anything for himself. I thought, this one is going to be decent. That was it. That was the whole thing. We were married 11 months later in a small ceremony at Cascade Road Baptist. My mother cried. His mother cried harder. The reception was in the church fellowship hall, and somebody's aunt made a coconut cake so good that 3 people asked for the recipe, and she told all 3 of them something different. We bought the house on Clement Street 2 years after that. 36 years ago. The neighborhood was different then, quieter, older, the kind of block where people still sat on their front porches in the evening and actually waved. The house needed work. The kitchen was the color of a manila envelope. The bathroom tile had a pattern that I can only describe as ambitious. The backyard was mostly dirt and a half-dead azalea, but the bones were good. Raymond walked every room twice, knocked on walls, tested windows, checked under sinks. He was methodical about things he cared about. He stood in the backyard for a long time, looking at the dirt, and then he looked at me and said, "We can make something here." We could. We did. The mortgage was $487 a month at signing. I remember that number the way I remember all numbers, completely and without effort. For the first few years, we paid it together, Raymond's check and mine, and it still felt tight. We didn't take vacations. We ate at home. I packed both our lunches every morning, his in a blue thermos bag he carried for 11 years until the zipper gave out. When Terrell was 4 and his older brother Damon was 7, the hot water heater went. Then the roof needed patching. Then the car. There is a particular kind of arithmetic that comes with owning something. The math of maintenance, of keeping a thing alive. I understood that math. I respected it, and I paid every bill on time, and I kept every receipt in an accordion folder organized by category and year. Raymond used to say I was the only person he knew who found comfort in paperwork. He wasn't wrong. When Raymond died, Damon was 32 and Terrell was 30. They both came home for the funeral. Damon lives in Houston now, has for 15 years, good job in logistics, steady wife named Patricia, 3 kids I see at Christmas if the flights work out. He called me every Sunday for the first year after Raymond passed. Still calls most Sundays. He doesn't say much. Neither do I. But the phone rings, and that is enough. Terrell stayed for 2 weeks after the funeral. He cooked. He fixed things around the house. He sat with me in the evenings the way Raymond used to. Not talking, just present. I was grateful for that. Then he went back to his life, and I went back to mine. The mortgage had 14 months left on it. I worked the following 3 tax seasons taking on private bookkeeping clients on Saturdays. Small businesses, a few individuals, a church that had been doing their own accounting and doing it, bless their hearts, very wrong. I paid the last mortgage payment on a Friday morning, and I sat at this very kitchen table with my coffee, and I looked out at Raymond's fig tree, and I felt something I don't have a clean word for. Not joy, exactly. More like completion, like the period at the end of a very long sentence. I called Damon. I called Terrell. I told them both the same thing. This house is mine, and it is yours, and nobody can take it. I believed that when I said it. Raymond planted the fig tree the first spring after we moved in. He dug the hole himself on a Saturday morning, early, before it got hot. He was particular about the location. Enough morning sun, some afternoon shade, good drainage. He'd read about it. He had a library book on fruit trees that he'd renewed so many times the librarian teased him about it. He patted the dirt down around the base of the tree with both hands, flat-palmed, careful, like he was tucking something in. That tree is almost 35 years old now. It is taller than the back fence. In late summer, it puts out figs so heavy the branches bend, and the whole yard takes on a smell that I cannot fully describe. Warm and green, and faintly sweet, like the air itself has been ripening. Raymond said it smelled like the house was breathing. I think about that every August when the figs come in. For years, and I made fig preserves in late summer, gave jars to the neighbors, brought them to church. My neighbor, Vera Cousins, who has lived next door for 22 years and who I will get to in a moment, she still asks for 2 jars every season without fail. She says she puts it on everything. That tree did not ask to be planted. It was put there by a man who loved this house and believed it would outlast him. It has. So have I. I want to tell you about Vera because she matters to this story. Vera Cousins is 68 years old. She retired 4 years ago from a law firm in Buckhead, where she worked as a paralegal for over 2 decades. She is small and brown and wears her silver hair natural, close-cropped. She has a voice like a woman who has spent her career in rooms where words had consequences. Measured, clear, nothing wasted. We became friends the way neighbors become friends when nobody is trying to, gradually, and then completely. It started with a borrowed extension cord 17 years ago and progressed through a shared fence repair, several hurricanes, 2 of her hip surgeries, Raymond's funeral, and more front porch evenings than I could count. Vera does not gossip. She observes. There is a difference. Gossip is noise. Observation is information. She had been watching the situation in my house for over a year before I said a word about it. I know because when I finally walked over to her house that Sunday morning, after the cruise was announced, before I even finished explaining, she stood up from her kitchen table and went to get her address book. I figured it was coming to this, she said. I've got someone. That is Vera Cousins. She's 22 years next door, and she has never once said, "I told you so." She just moves to the next step. I trust very few people that completely. She is one of them. The first year Terrell and Candace were in the house, I told myself I was lucky. Some mothers don't have their children close. Some mothers are alone in houses like this, all the space and no one to fill it. I had help with the yard. I had company at dinner. I had a reason to cook a full Sunday meal. Baked chicken and rice, macaroni and cheese from scratch, collard greens with smoked turkey, cornbread in the cast iron skillet. Candace ate small portions and said it was all delicious. She was polite about it in the careful way of someone who has been told to be polite. Terrell ate the way he always had. 2 plates, no hesitation. It made the same sound of satisfaction he'd made since he was 8 years old. For a moment, those Sunday evenings, it felt like something was being restored. Like the house was full in the way houses are supposed to be full. I held on to that feeling longer than I should have. Because I wanted it to be true. Because I am his mother, and wanting the good version of your child is not a weakness. But I am also a bookkeeper. And a bookkeeper knows that wanting something to balance doesn't make it balance. The numbers were already starting not to add up. The pantry was the first thing. I came downstairs one morning, about 4 months after Terrell and Candace moved in, and opened the pantry door and stood there for a moment, trying to understand what I was looking at. Everything had been moved. The canned goods were alphabetized. The spices were in a rotating rack I had never seen before, the kind you buy at a home organizing store. My dry goods, the grits, the cornmeal, the dried beans I keep in glass jars with handwritten labels, had been consolidated onto one shelf in the back. Candace was at the kitchen table with her coffee, laptop open, already working. "I hope you don't mind," she said, without looking up. "I reorganized for efficiency. Everything's labeled." I looked at my pantry. I had known where everything was for 31 years. I didn't need labels. "Thank you," I said. I moved things back over the next 2 days. Quietly, a few items at a time. My grits go on the second shelf, left side. The canned tomatoes go next to the beans. The cornmeal goes where the cornmeal has always gone. A week later, the pantry was reorganized again. Same system. Same rotating spice rack. I left it alone after that. I told myself it was just a pantry. I was right, technically. It was just a pantry. But I noted it. A bookkeeper notes discrepancies and keeps moving. You don't close the books over one wrong entry. You watch for the pattern. The streaming account was next. I noticed it on a Wednesday evening when I sat down to watch my program and found my profile was gone. Not moved. Gone. I called Terrell into the living room and showed him the screen. "Oh," he said. "Yeah, Candace consolidated the billing. We've got a family plan now. It's actually cheaper." I had a profile. My watch list was on there. "We can set you up a new one." Same thing. It was not the same thing. I had 60-something shows saved across 3 different categories, organized by priority. But I looked at my son's face, and he genuinely did not understand why this mattered to me. His face said, "It's just a streaming account, Mama." So I said, "Okay." I set up a new profile. I rebuilt my watch list from memory because I remember things. But I noted it. The contractor visit I already told you about. What I didn't tell you is what happened after. That evening, I looked up the contractor's company on my tablet. Reynolds Home Conversions, Garage to Suite Specialists. Their website had a photo gallery. Before and after shots of garages turned into guest rooms, in-law suites, small apartments with their own entrances. In-law suites. I sat with that for a moment. Then I put the tablet down and went to water my rose bushes. Terrell had not asked me about converting the garage. He had not said whose suite it would be. He had said nothing decided and gone back to his phone. And I had let it go because I was raised not to borrow trouble. But I had looked it up. I had seen the photo gallery, and the arithmetic was getting harder to ignore. Beverly started being more present that same month. I want to be fair about Beverly Okafor. She is Candace's mother. She is 64 years old. She grew up in Decatur, raised 4 children mostly on her own after her husband left when Candace was 9. And she has the particular energy of a woman who decided a long time ago that the world owed her some comfort, and she intended to collect. She is not a bad person. I don't believe in cataloging people as bad or good. It's too simple, and it lets everybody off too easy. Beverly is a woman who sees an opening and walks through it. I understand that impulse, and I have just never made a habit of walking through other people's doors uninvited. She came for dinner on a Friday, then again the following Sunday. Then 2 weekends in a row she stayed through Monday morning. Small things appeared: her reading glasses on the side table, a cardigan on the hook by the back door that was not mine, a brand of orange juice in the refrigerator that nobody in this house drinks except Beverly. One Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find her and Candace at the kitchen table going through paint swatches. Paint swatches. For my walls. I stood in the doorway in my robe. Beverly looked up and smiled the smile of a woman who has decided she is already comfortable. "Morning, Dolores. We were just looking at some ideas for freshening up the guest room. What do you think about a warm gray?" The guest room is my guest room. It has been painted the same soft yellow since Damon was in high school. I chose that color. I painted it myself. "I'll think about it," I said. I went to make my coffee. I noted it. What I want you to understand is that none of these things, taken alone, would be enough to call something wrong. A reorganized pantry, a streaming profile, a contractor visit, a mother-in-law with paint swatches. Individually, each one is an inconvenience, a minor friction, the kind of thing you bring up and get told you're being sensitive. But I am a bookkeeper. I do not look at individual entries. I look at the ledger, and the ledger was telling me something. The pattern was consistent, and it moved in one direction. Every adjustment, every change, we were thinking, all of it was slowly, methodically, replacing my presence in my own house with someone else's. Not loudly, not cruelly, quietly, efficiently. The way you'd move furniture when the person who owns it isn't looking. Terrell was not the architect of it. I don't believe that. My son is not a planner by nature. That second business failed in part because he trusted momentum over structure. But Candace is a planner. Candace thinks in systems. She moves through a room measuring it with her eyes, and she had been measuring my house for 2 years. Terrell loved his wife. He wanted her comfortable. He had stopped asking his mother's opinion on things because his wife had opinions, and they were right there and easier. I understood it. Understanding it didn't make it acceptable. It was a Thursday evening, about 3 weeks before the cruise was announced, when Beverly crossed a line that I felt in my body. I came home from an afternoon at Vera's to find Beverly sitting in Raymond's chair. Not the sofa, not the armchair by the window that Terrell always uses. Raymond's chair. The big brown one in the corner by the bookshelf. The one with the worn patch on the left armrest where he used to rest his hand. I have never told anyone not to sit in that chair. It is just a chair. But in 22 years since Raymond bought it, no one has ever sat in it except Raymond. And, after he was gone, occasionally me. Beverly was sitting in it, with her shoes off, reading something on her phone, completely at ease. Her reading glasses were on her face. I stood in the living room doorway. She looked up. "Oh, Dolores. Hey. I hope you don't mind. This chair is so comfortable. I see why you keep it." The light was doing its 4 o'clock thing across the floor, that stripe I know by heart. "It was my husband's," I said. "Oh, how sweet." She looked back at her phone. My hands were very still at my sides. My jaw was tight. I walked to the kitchen and stood at the sink and ran the water cold over my wrists and looked out at the fig tree until my chest loosened. I noted it. I noted all of it. And then I waited for what I somehow already knew was coming. The cruise was announced 6 days later. The dinner was a Saturday. Candace had cooked, which was notable. She cooked maybe once a month. Clean food, careful portions, the kind of meals that photograph well and taste like effort without warmth. That evening, she made baked salmon with a lemon herb crust, our roasted asparagus, and a wild rice pilaf. The table was set properly. Cloth napkins, the good glasses. I noticed the good glasses immediately. We didn't use the good glasses for regular Saturday dinners. We used them for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the occasional Sunday when Damon visited from Houston. Raymond had picked them out himself. Heavy crystal, simple pattern, the kind that ring when you tap them. I used to tap mine just to hear it. Candace had filled them with sparkling water before I sat down. Beverly was not there that evening. I noticed that too. The three of us ate and talked about small things. A neighbor's new car, a news story Terrell had seen, something Candace's sister had done that Candace described as a lot. I ate my salmon and listened and participated and felt the entire time. The specific sensation of waiting for a shoe to drop. It didn't drop during dinner. It dropped after, when Terrell cleared the plates. He cleared the plates, which he did not usually do, and came back to the table and sat down across from me and folded his hands and smiled. That smile. I know every smile my son has. I have known them since he was 3 days old. That one, chin slightly down, eyes a little too bright. The one that appears when he is about to ask for something or present something he has already decided. I have known that smile for 43 years. "Mama," he said, "we've been talking." Candace set a brochure on the table in front of me. Norwegian Cruise Line, Caribbean Splendor, 14 nights. The cover photo was a turquoise ocean, a white ship, a sky so blue it looked painted. A woman about my age was on the deck in the photo, leaning on the railing, looking out at the water. She looked peaceful. She looked, specifically, like a woman who was somewhere far from home. I picked it up. I looked at it. "It's your retirement gift," Terrell said. "We should have done this years ago, honestly, long overdue." "This is so thoughtful," I said. "When did you put this together?" "We've been planning it for a little while." He glanced at Candace. "We wanted to do something real. Something you'd remember. Candace slid the itinerary across the table next, color-coded, printed on cardstock. Each port stop had its own color. Blue for Nassau, green for St. Thomas, yellow for San Juan. The shore excursions were already selected and listed by day. The dining reservations were already made. The spa appointments were already booked. All of it. Already done. Already decided. I looked at it for a long moment. You two did all this? We wanted it to be a real surprise, Candace said. No planning stress for you. Just show up and enjoy. The word surprise sat in the air between us. I turned a page. At the bottom of the third sheet, in small print, was a line I was not meant to focus on. Return transfer arranged. Contact listed, C. Whitman, Candace's name, as my emergency contact for the return, not Terrell. Candace. I turned the page back and looked at the front of the itinerary. I kept my face exactly where it was. Just for me? I asked. Just for you, Mama. Terrell reached across and covered my hand with his. You deserve solo time. Time to just breathe, decompress. We'll hold things down here. 2 whole weeks, I said. 14 nights, he said. You all-inclusive, balcony cabin. You don't have to think about anything. I looked at my son's hand on mine. He was squeezing gently, the way he had when he was small and wanted something. Not demanding, just applying the slightest pressure. A child's negotiation. I had always found it hard to resist. I looked at Candace. She was looking at her water glass. Her finger was tracing the rim, slow circles. Not drinking. The good crystal. The kind that rings when you tap it. She did not look at me once during the part where Terrell talked about what I deserved. How long have you been planning this? I asked. Few weeks, Terrell said. Longer, Candace said, at the same time. A half-second pause. Terrell recovered smoothly. Yeah, a little longer. We wanted to get it right. I smiled. I picked up the brochure, and I told them it was the most thoughtful thing anyone had ever done for me. You raised a good son, Candace said to me, looking at Terrell. She said it like I was already a story he told about his past. I went to bed at 9:30 that evening. I didn't sleep. I lay on my back in the dark and I looked at the ceiling and I let my mind do what it does. Line things up. Find the shape of things. Look for where the numbers don't match. 14 nights. Departure in 4 days. Luggage already packed without asking me. Shore excursions already chosen without asking me. A return transfer arranged in Candace's name. Beverly with paint swatches. A contractor measuring the garage. The pantry reorganized. The streaming profile deleted. We were thinking. My hands were flat on the quilt Raymond's mother had made. Double wedding ring pattern. Blues and greens, edges worn soft from decades of use. I thought, they have a timeline. And then I thought, I need to know what's on it. At 11 o'clock, I gave up on sleep and came downstairs. The kitchen was dark. The refrigerator hummed its low, steady hum, the same sound it has made for 9 years since I replaced the old one. I didn't turn the light on. I knew where everything was. I put the kettle on. Chamomile. I stood at the counter while the water heated and looked out the window at the backyard. The fig tree was a dark shape against the fence, the way it looks on nights without much moon. Solid and still and completely itself. The iPad was on the counter where it always sat, charging beside the toaster. I picked it up to look up the cruise line. I do this with things. Look them up. Read the reviews. Check the rating. Understand what I'm dealing with before I commit to anything. 34 years as a bookkeeper will make you that way. You verify. You don't assume. The screen came on. The email app was open. A thread, mid-conversation, filling the screen. I don't know if Candace had been reading it and set the iPad down without closing it. I don't know if Terrell had. I will never know. But it was there, open, bright in the dark kitchen. And I read it the way I read everything. Completely, from the beginning, missing nothing. The thread was between Candace and her sister Renata. The first email was from 3 months ago. Renata talked to Terrell again. He's on board, but he keeps stalling. I'm going to move forward with the cruise idea. Get Mama out for 2 weeks. Enough time to get the room set up and figure out the garage situation before she's back. She won't make a scene if it's already done. You know how she is. I set the kettle down without pouring it. Renata's reply, 2 weeks enough? What if she comes back early? Candace, she won't. I'm handling the return transfer. And honestly, if she loves it out there, maybe she decides she wants to stay longer. T said she's always talked about traveling. We just give her a reason to keep going. I read that one twice. If she loves it out there, maybe she decides she wants to stay longer. There it was. Not we hope she has a wonderful time. Not we want her to rest. The plan, in plain language. Get me gone. Get comfortable. And make the going so pleasant that maybe I wouldn't come back on my own. I scrolled down. Terrell's name appeared. Candace had forwarded him something, and he'd replied. She'll be so relaxed she won't want to come back a winky face. My son. About his mother's home. The next email was a quote from a storage company. Atlanta Metro Storage Solutions. Line items for boxes, packing materials, a truck. And at the bottom, in the service description field, estate clearance. Partial. Pickup address, and then my address. Clement Street. The last email in the thread was from Candace to Beverly. We're confirmed for the 14th. You and Jerome can take the master. We'll figure out the garage for Marcus by end of month. Just don't touch the fig tree until we're sure. Jerome was Beverly's boyfriend. Marcus was Candace's younger brother. The master bedroom. Raymond's chair. Raymond's bedroom. I stood in my dark kitchen in my nightgown, and my bare feet on the kitchen floor. I had retiled myself, and I read that email one more time. Just don't touch the fig tree until we're sure. Until they were sure of what? That I wasn't coming back? That there was no version of the plan in which I came home and found them there? My chest was very tight. My feet were cold against the tile. I closed the iPad cover. I set it down. Exactly where it had been. I stood at the window and looked at the fig tree for a long time. Then I turned off the kettle. I went upstairs. I got back into bed. I pulled Raymond's mother's quilt up to my chin. And I made a decision. Not a loud one. Not a dramatic one. The quiet kind. The kind that settles into your bones while you're lying still in the dark and feels by morning like it has always been true. See, I was going to go on that cruise. And before I left, I was going to make a phone call. I want to tell you what I did not do. I did not go upstairs and wake Terrell up. I did not stand in the doorway of my own bedroom, the bedroom Beverly and Jerome were apparently scheduled to occupy, and tell my son what I had read. I did not call Candace's name from the bottom of the stairs. I did not cry, not once, not in the kitchen, and not later in bed with the quilt pulled up and the dark pressing in from all sides. I have been asked since all of this why I didn't just confront them right then. The answer is simple. I am not a woman who spends her ammunition in the dark. You wait for daylight. You make sure of your position. You don't fire until you know exactly what you're firing at, and you are certain you will not miss. For 34 years, balancing other people's books taught me that the person who stays calm in a crisis controls the outcome. The person who loses their composure hands that control to someone else. I had no intention of handing anything to anyone. Not one more thing. I was up at 6 the next morning. Sunday. I made a full breakfast. Biscuits from scratch, the way Raymond liked them. Not too tall, slightly crisp on the bottom, soft through the middle. Scrambled eggs with sharp cheddar. Turkey bacon. Orange juice from the good oranges, squeezed by hand, not the carton. I set the table for 3. Terrell came down first, drawn by the smell the way he had been since he was 7 years old. He stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at the table and then at me, and his face did something complicated, something between gratitude and guilt that he didn't know how to carry at the same time. Mama, you didn't have to do all this. I wanted to, I said. I handed him a plate. Candace came down 20 minutes later in her workout clothes, hair pulled back. She looked at the table. She looked at me. You cooked, she said. Sit down and eat while it's hot, I said. She sat. She ate a biscuit and a small portion of eggs, and she was pleasant and careful, and she refilled my orange juice without being asked, which was the kind of detail that might have moved me once and did not move me now. We talked about the cruise. I asked about the ports. I asked about the excursions she had selected. I let her explain the color-coded itinerary to me as though I had not already read it twice. I asked good questions. I was genuinely interested, in the way that you become genuinely interested in something once you understand its full purpose. When Terrell went upstairs to shower, I cleared the plates. Candace offered to help. I told her I had it. She went back upstairs. I washed the dishes alone. I looked out at the fig tree the whole time. At 9 o'clock, I put on my good walking shoes and my light blue cardigan, and I went next door to Vera's house. She answered the door before I knocked twice. She took one look at my face, not at my expression, which I had managed, but at something underneath it. The thing that 22 years of friendship lets a person see. And she stepped back from the door to let me in without a word. Her kitchen smelled like coffee and the lemon furniture polish she uses on her table every Sunday morning. I sat down in my usual chair, the one facing the window that looks out at our shared fence. The fig tree is visible from that window, just the upper branches, green and full. Vera set a mug in front of me. She sat down across the table. She folded her hands and waited. I told her everything, not quickly, not emotionally. The way I would present a discrepancy to a superintendent, methodical, chronological, the pantry, the streaming account, the contractor, Beverly's visits, the paint swatches, Raymond's chair, the dinner with the good glasses, the itinerary with Candace's name on the return transfer, the iPad. I told her about the emails. All of them. I had read them twice, and I have a bookkeeper's memory. So I gave her the substance of each one with accuracy. I told her about estate clearance, partial. I told her about just don't touch the fig tree until we're sure. Vera did not interrupt me once. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Her coffee cup was halfway to her mouth, and she set it back down without drinking. "How long has the email thread been going?" she asked. 3 months, I said. "The first one is from 3 months ago." She nodded slowly, the nod of a woman who has spent 20 years in legal offices watching people underestimate what's in writing. "They put it in email," she said. "They did. Dolores." She looked at me carefully. "Are you all right?" My hands were wrapped around my mug. The ceramic was warm. I stared at the grain of the table for a moment, the long lines in the wood, and the small, dark knot near the edge that I had looked at 100 times from this chair. "I'm going to be," I said. She stood up and went to get her address book. "Tell me, would you have confronted them right then? Or would you have done what Dolores did? Tell me in the comments." "I've got someone," Vera said, coming back to the table with a worn leather address book, the kind nobody keeps anymore. She opened it to a tabbed section near the back. "James Whitfield. Real estate attorney. Been practicing for 30 years. He did my deed review when I refinanced. Straightforward, no nonsense, knows property law cold." She wrote his number on a slip of paper and pushed it across the table. I looked at it. "It's Sunday." "He has an answering service. Leave a message. He'll call you Monday morning." She paused. How long do you have before the departure?" 4 days. Something moved across her face, a tightening, brief and controlled. "Then you need to be in his office by Tuesday at the latest." I folded the slip of paper and put it in the pocket of my cardigan. I went home, and I looked up James Whitfield on my tablet. His firm's website was clean and plain. No flashy design, no stock photos of people shaking hands. Just a name, a practice area, 30 years of experience, and a phone number. The reviews were thorough and consistent. People described him in words like steady and precise, and he told me the truth even when I didn't want to hear it. That was what I needed. Not someone dramatic. Not someone who would make this bigger than it was. Someone who would look at the deed and tell me exactly what it said and exactly what I could do with it. I called the answering service at 10:15 Sunday morning. I left a clear, brief message. My name, my property address, the nature of my concern. I am the sole owner of a property, and I need to understand my legal options regarding occupants who may be planning to alter the residence without my consent. I did not use the word son. Not yet. I kept it to the facts. I hung up and set the phone on the kitchen table. Outside, a car went by on Clement Street. The fig tree moved a little in the breeze. The kitchen was quiet. I had 4 days before the cruise departed, and I had a slip of paper in my cardigan pocket and a message waiting for a lawyer's answering service, and 34 years of knowing how to wait without showing that I was waiting. I went back upstairs and I started going through the suitcases Candace had packed for me. I unpacked everything. I refolded every item my way. I put back what I would actually wear, and I removed what I would not. I reorganized the toiletry bag. I found, at the very bottom of the larger suitcase, under a folded rain jacket, a small manila envelope with my name written on it in Terrell's handwriting. Inside was a ship card, the kind you use for onboard purchases. Already loaded, already activated, already in my name. A generous amount, more than generous. I held it in my palm for a moment. Then I put it in the toiletry bag, in the small zipper pocket where I keep things I intend to use. I was not going to refuse their money. I had not asked for a gift, and I had not planned this trip. But I was going to that ship. And if they wanted to fund the cruise on which I organized the end of their arrangement, I was not going to be precious about it. I repacked the suitcase my way. I zipped it closed. I went back downstairs and cooked a light lunch and called Damon in Houston. I had not told Damon anything yet. I want to be honest about that. Part of me was still hoping I had misread something, that there was a version of those emails I had interpreted too harshly, that my son had not looked at a winky face emoji and typed, "She won't want to come back about his mother's house." But I knew I hadn't misread it. I am not a woman who misreads things. Yeah, I just needed one more day before I made it real by saying it out loud to my older son, who would take it harder than I would and be less quiet about it. So I called him, and I asked about the grandchildren. I asked about Patricia's new job. I listened to him talk for 40 minutes, and I laughed in the right places, and I said yes and mm-hmm, and tell her I said so. And when he asked how I was, I said, "I'm good, baby. Taking a cruise next week, if you can believe it." He laughed. "A cruise? Mama, look at you." "Look at me," I said. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a while. The 4 o'clock light came through the window and laid its stripe across the floor. I put my hand in it. Let it sit there, warm and familiar. Then I got up and started dinner. Monday morning, James Whitfield's office called at 8:47. His assistant set an appointment for Tuesday at 2 o'clock. She was brisk and professional and asked only what was necessary. When she confirmed the address, she said, "Mr. Whitfield asks that you bring any property documents you have on hand." I already had them out. Had them out since Sunday night. The deed, the paid-off mortgage paperwork, the title insurance document, the property tax records for the last 11 years, the original purchase agreement from 36 years ago, 34 years as a bookkeeper. My files are organized by category and year. I put everything in a large manila envelope and set it by my purse near the front door. Candace passed through the living room that morning and glanced at the envelope. "Getting some paperwork in order before the trip?" "Just being tidy," I said. She nodded and kept moving. She did not ask what was in it. That was the difference between us. I looked at everything. She only looked at what she expected to see. Tuesday came in cool and clear, the kind of fall morning in Atlanta that feels like an apology for the summer. I dressed carefully, not formally. I wasn't going to court. But I put on my gray wool slacks and my good cream blouse and the small pearl earrings Raymond gave me for our 20th anniversary. Practical and composed. The way I dressed for budget presentations when I needed a room full of principals to understand that the woman standing in front of them had already thought of everything they were about to question. Terrell was working from home that day. He was at the kitchen table with his laptop when I came downstairs with my manila envelope under my arm and my good purse on my shoulder. He looked up. "You look nice. Where you headed?" "Errands," I said. I poured coffee into my travel mug. "I'll be back before dinner." "Want me to come? I can move some things around." "I'm fine, baby." I kissed him on the top of his head, the way I had when he was small. "Enjoy your morning?" I was out the door before he could ask anything else. Vera was waiting on her front porch when I came out. She had her good coat on. I had not asked her to come. She had simply decided, in the way of a woman who has spent 20 years knowing when her presence is necessary. We drove downtown together. She didn't talk much. Neither did I. The radio was on low, an old Anita Baker song, the kind that Raymond used to hum without realizing he was doing it. I kept my hands steady on the wheel and watched the city move past the windows and felt, somewhere in my chest, the particular stillness of a woman who has made her decision and is now simply executing it. James Whitfield's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree. The waiting room was plain. No artwork trying too hard, no leather sofas, just clean lines, good light, and a receptionist who offered water without being asked. I appreciated all of it. James Whitfield was in his mid-60s, gray at the temples, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of unhurried manner that comes from 3 decades of watching people panic in his office and knowing that panic rarely helps. He stood when I came in, shook my hand, and gestured to the chair across from his desk without rushing any of it. Vera sat beside me. She did not introduce herself as a paralegal. She didn't need to. The way she sat, back straight, hands folded, eyes taking in the room with professional calm, said it clearly enough. I opened my manila envelope and put everything on the desk in order. Deed first, then mortgage payoff confirmation, then title insurance, then tax records. 34 years of organized documentation laid out in under 90 seconds. Whitfield looked at the stack. Something in his expression settled. The slight shift of a man who has spent his career sorting through chaos and just recognized the opposite of it. "Tell me what's happening," he said. I told him. The same way I had told Vera. Methodical, chronological, no editorializing. I told him about the emails. I described the storage company. Quote, I told him about the garage conversion inquiry, about Beverly and Jerome assigned to the master bedroom, about Marcus and the end-of-month timeline. I told him about the cruise departure in 3 days. He listened without writing anything down. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, looking at the deed. "This property," he said, "your name only." "Since the day we signed," I said. "Has your son contributed to the mortgage at any point?" "He has not. The mortgage was paid off 4 years before he moved in." "Has he contributed to property taxes, insurance, any maintenance costs since moving in?" "He has not. I have not asked him to." Whitfield nodded slowly. He picked up the deed and looked at it for a moment, the way I look at a ledger that is already telling me something. Then he set it back down. "You have very clean standing," he said. "What would you like to do with it?" I had thought about this. I had thought about it lying awake Sunday night, and Monday morning while I reorganized my suitcase, and Monday evening while I cooked dinner and Terrell and Candace sat at my kitchen table and talked about what they wanted to do with the back porch in spring. There were several things I could do. I knew that. I could change the locks before I left. I could call Terrell in and lay the emails on the table and watch what happened to his face. I could call Damon and have him fly in. I could do any number of things that were loud and immediate and would scatter the situation in all directions before I had full control of where the pieces landed. I didn't want that. I wanted what I had always wanted from a set of numbers that didn't add up: clarity, documentation, and an outcome I had chosen rather than stumbled into. I told Whitfield what I wanted. He asked 2 more questions. He made 2 phone calls from his desk while I sat there. When he hung up the second time, he looked at his calendar and then at me. "I can have the documents ready before your departure," he said. I leave Thursday morning, I said. They'll be ready Wednesday afternoon. Vera looked at me. I looked at Whitfield. Then we have a plan, I said. We were back in the car by 4 o'clock. The afternoon light was low and golden, the way it gets in fall, laying itself across everything at a long angle. Vera sat in the passenger seat and looked straight ahead for a moment, and then she exhaled. One long, slow breath. You know this changes things with Terrell, she said. I know. He may not. I know, Vera. She nodded. She didn't say anything else about it. That is the thing about a friend who has known you for 22 years. She can tell the difference between things you haven't considered and things you've already finished grieving. I had sat with what this meant for Terrell and me. I had sat with it Sunday night and Monday night, and that morning while I dressed. I had felt it in the way you feel something that is both necessary and costly at the same time. A particular weight that doesn't go away, but that you decide to carry anyway, because the alternative is worse. My son was 43 years old. He had made choices and written a winky face emoji, and let his wife put his mother's belongings in a storage quote labeled estate clearance. He was not a child. He had not been confused. He had been convinced by comfort, by Candace, by the easy arithmetic of wanting something and deciding the person in the way would simply not be in the way anymore. I was still his mother. I would be his mother until I died, and probably in some form after that. But being his mother did not mean absorbing this without consequence. Love is not the same as permission. It never was. Wednesday, I went about my day normally. I confirmed my packing. I watered my rose bushes. I made a grocery list for the things I would want when I got home and left it on the counter in plain sight, because I have never been a woman who hides what she is planning. At 2:45, Whitfield's assistant called to confirm the documents were ready for pickup. I drove downtown alone this time. I sat in the parking garage for a moment before I went in, both hands on the wheel, looking at nothing in particular. Then I went upstairs and collected what I had asked for. 2 documents in a sealed envelope. On the first was a formal declaration of sole property ownership, a notarized summary of the deed status, the mortgage payoff, the tax record, and a clear statement of my rights as the property's only legal owner. Simple, unambiguous. The second was a residential lease agreement, 2 bedrooms, fair market rate for the West End. I had looked it up myself, cross-referenced 3 comparable properties, 12-month term, standard clauses, standard deposit, Terrell's name on the tenant line, space for his signature at the bottom. If he wanted to live in my house, he could live in my house, at market rate, like an adult. I put the envelope in my good purse and drove home. That evening after dinner, I excused myself early and went upstairs. I could hear Terrell and Candace in the kitchen below, but talking in the low, easy tones of people who believe tomorrow is already settled. I heard Candace laugh at something. I heard Terrell's voice go up the way it does when he's telling a story he likes. I sat on the edge of my bed. Raymond's quilt folded at the foot of it. I picked up my phone and called the cruise line. The representative who answered had a cheerful voice and a slight southern accent and seemed genuinely pleased to help. I upgraded my cabin from the interior room Candace had booked to a balcony. Not the most expensive one, just the one with a good view and a chair I could sit in while the ocean moved past. Then I called the airline. The return ticket Terrell had arranged was for day 14, a Tuesday, early morning. I changed it. I booked a new return for day 10, a Friday, it arriving back in Atlanta at 11:15 in the morning. The representative asked if everything was okay with the original booking. "Everything is fine," I said. "I just have somewhere to be." I paid the change fee without hesitating. It was less than the ship card Terrell had loaded for me. I found a kind of satisfaction in that math. I set the phone down and sat in the quiet for a while. The house was still making its nighttime sounds. The settling of old walls, the hum of the refrigerator 3 floors down, the faint sound of the television. Terrell had turned on in the living room. My house, its sounds, its walls. I put the sealed envelope in the inside pocket of my carry-on bag. I zipped it closed. I set the bag by the bedroom door. I got into bed, pulled Raymond's quilt up, and I slept better than I had in weeks. The Thursday morning came gray and quiet. Terrell carried my suitcase to the car. He was warm and cheerful, and he hugged me in the driveway for a long time, longer than usual, and I let him. I put my arms around my son, and I felt the weight of him, the same boy who used to fall asleep in the back seat of our old Buick on the way home from church, shoes still on, mouth open, completely trusting that someone would carry him inside. I held that. Candace stood on the porch. She waved. She smiled the careful smile. "Have a wonderful time, Dolores," she said. "I intend to," I said. I got in the car. I backed down the driveway. I looked at my house once, the brick front, the rose bushes, the porch that needed repainting. And then I looked at the road ahead. I drove to the airport. I did not look back again. And the ship was called the Norwegian Star, and it was genuinely beautiful. I want to say that plainly because it is true, and because I believe in giving credit where it is due, even to people who meant something as a removal and accidentally gave you something real. The Caribbean in late fall is a particular kind of blue, not the blue of postcards, which is too bright and too simple. The actual blue, layered, deep, moving, the kind that changes color depending on where the light is coming from and how far down you can see. I stood on my balcony the first morning and looked at it for a long time. I had a real balcony, not the interior cabin Candace had booked. The upgrade I had chosen for myself, a corner unit with a view off the starboard side and a cushioned chair and a small table where I took my coffee every morning and watched the water change as the sun moved. I ate well. Properly well. Not the small, careful portions of someone who is a guest in their own life. Grilled snapper with mango salsa in Nassau. Conch fritters at a small place near the port in Freeport that a woman at the next table recommended after we started talking about nothing in particular and ended up talking for 2 hours. A rum cake in St. Thomas that I bought 2 of. One to eat immediately at a table outside a small bakery with the harbor in front of me, and one to bring home for Vera. I read 4 books. Real reading. The kind where you lose track of time and look up and the light has completely changed and you are briefly unsure where you are. I had not read like that in years. I took a kayaking excursion in St. John that I had chosen myself, not from Candace's color-coded list. A small group, a young guide named Caleb, who knew every cove by name, glassy green water shallow enough to see the bottom. My arms were sore for 2 days after. I didn't mind. I called Vera on day 3. She answered on the second ring. "How's the water?" she said. Raymond would have loved it, I said. A beat of silence, the kind that means something between two people who knew him. You ready? She asked. Getting there, I said. I did not call Terrell from the ship. He texted twice. Hope you're having an amazing time, Mama, and then 3 days later, we're good here, just checking in. And I sent back short, warm replies that told him nothing. Wonderful, eating well, beautiful out here. All true, y'all complete. All containing nothing he needed to know yet. On day 7, I sat on my balcony in the early morning, before the rest of the ship was fully awake, and I let myself feel what I had been keeping carefully managed since Sunday night in my dark kitchen. Not performed grief, not the kind you put on for an audience. The real kind, which is quieter and heavier and lives somewhere behind your sternum. My son had looked at a winky face emoji and typed, "She won't want to come back about his mother's house." My son, who I had driven to school for 12 years and held through fevers and attended every little league game of, and called on his birthday at midnight since the year he turned 18, because he always stayed up until midnight on his birthday. That son had written those words. I didn't cry. I'm not someone who cries easily, and I don't consider that a virtue or a flaw, just a fact. But I sat with it. I let it be what it was, fully, without managing it, for about 20 minutes on that balcony with the ocean moving beneath me and the early light coming up gold from the east. Then I finished my coffee. I went inside. I showered and dressed and went to breakfast. Grief is not a reason to skip breakfast. Raymond used to say you could get through almost anything if you kept eating. He was not wrong. Day 10 was a Friday. I was packed and at the port shuttle by 6:30. My flight left at 9:40. It was a direct flight, 2 hours and change, smooth, the kind of flight where you barely have time to settle before they're telling you to put your tray table up. I landed in Atlanta at 11:15, exactly as scheduled. I took a car from the airport. Not a cab, a car service, the kind you book in advance. Clean, quiet, a driver who did not feel the need to fill the silence. I sat in the back and watched Atlanta come into view through the window. The skyline first, then the neighborhoods, then the familiar grid of the West End, the streets I have driven for 36 years. Clement Street looked the same from the outside. It always does. I asked the driver to wait. I got out. I walked up the front path, past the rose bushes, up the 3 porch steps. I put my key in my own front door. I turned it. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Not my house's smell. The particular combination of old wood and the rose oil I use on the furniture and the faint sweetness from the fig tree that drifts in through the back when the windows are open. Something different. Something powdery and floral, thick enough to notice. Beverly's perfume, the kind that announces itself before the person does. I stood in my entryway and breathed it in. 1 second. 2. Then I walked in. The living room had been rearranged, not dramatically. Subtly. The couch shifted slightly toward the window, the coffee table at a different angle, a throw blanket I did not own draped over Raymond's chair, a pair of reading glasses on the side table. Beverly's. I set my carry-on bag down by the door. From upstairs I could hear a television, the murmur of voices, a midday talk show, the kind that Beverly liked. I had heard it through the wall enough times to recognize the tone. From somewhere in the back of the house, the sound of movement, footsteps, a drawer opening and closing. I walked to the kitchen. Candace was standing at my counter with her back to me, going through what looked like paint samples spread across the surface. Not the wall paint. Tile samples. Backsplash. For my kitchen. She heard me come in and turned around. Her face went through 4 things in approximately 2 seconds: recognition, confusion, calculation, and then a version of composure that arrived a beat too late and knew it. Dolores. Her voice was even, almost. You're home early." "I am," I said. "We weren't expecting you until—" "I know when you were expecting me," I said. She set the tile sample down. Her hand was steady, but she set it down. Terrell came downstairs 3 minutes later. I know because I was standing in the kitchen looking at the tile samples on my counter. There were 11 of them, arranged in a rough grid, each one tagged with a small sticker. And I heard his footsteps on the stairs, and then they stopped completely for a moment on the landing, which is when he must have seen my carry-on bag by the front door. He came into the kitchen. He looked at me. He looked at Candace. His face did not go through 4 things. It went through 1 thing, and it stayed there. And the thing it went through was the face of a man who has known since he was 7 years old that his mother sees everything and has spent his whole life being grateful for it except for right now. "Mama," he said, "you're home." "I live here," I said. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside the back window, the fig tree stood exactly where it had stood for 34 years. From upstairs, the sound of the television cut off. Footsteps across the ceiling. The master bedroom, Raymond's bedroom. And then the sound of Beverly's voice in the hallway above us, calling down the stairs. "Candy? Was that the door? Is Jerome back with the—" She appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked down and saw me in my own kitchen. She didn't finish the sentence. I looked up at her. "Good morning, Beverly," I said. She came down the stairs slowly. She was wearing a housecoat. Settled in, comfortable. Morning of her own home, comfortable. She reached the bottom step and stood there, and her mouth opened slightly. And then she looked at Candace. Candace was looking at the counter. "I'd like everyone who doesn't live here to be gone by Friday," I said. My voice was the same voice I used in budget meetings when the numbers were final and the discussion was over, clear, level. And not unkind because there was no need for unkindness. Reality was doing everything that needed to be done. "That gives Beverly and Jerome 2 days to make arrangements. I think that's reasonable." Beverly's mouth opened again. "Now wait just a minute, Dolores. We were told." "I know what you were told," I said. "I know exactly what you were told. But this is my house, and I'm telling you something different." Terrell said, "Mama, if we could all sit down and just—" I turned to my son. I looked at him the way I had looked at him across that kitchen table his whole life. Directly, without flinching, the way his father looked at him when it was time to stop explaining and start listening. I reached into the inside pocket of my carry-on bag. I took out the sealed envelope from Whitfield's office. I set it on the kitchen counter, next to the tile samples for the backsplash of my kitchen. "This is a document confirming sole ownership of this property," I said. "My name, my deed, paid in full. And behind it is a lease agreement. Fair market rate, 12-month term, your name on the tenant line." I looked at my son. "If you want to stay in this house, Terrell, those are the terms." The silence was complete. Terrell stared at the envelope. The color moved out of his face slowly, the way color moves out of something when you understand what you're looking at. Mama, I love you, I said. That's why the lease is fair market and not more. He picked up the envelope. He held it. His hands were still, but his jaw was working. That thing he did when he was trying not to show what he was feeling had done it since he was 9 years old, and it had never once worked. Candace was completely quiet. She was looking at the tile samples. I left them in the kitchen. I carried my bag upstairs. I opened my bedroom door. The room was mine, undisturbed. They had not moved in here yet. The timeline, apparently, had not reached this room. My quilt was on the bed. Raymond's chair was where it belonged. The light through the window was the midday light, different from the 4 o'clock light, but mine. I set my bag down. I looked at the room for a moment. Then I went to run a bath. I filled the tub with hot water and the eucalyptus salts I keep on the shelf above it. I got in. I lay back. Through the small bathroom window, I could hear, faintly, voices downstairs. Terrell's low and strained, Candace's even and quiet, Beverly's pitched higher than the other two. Not words. Just the sound of a situation being reckoned with. I closed my eyes. The water was hot. The salt smelled clean. Somewhere outside, a bird was going about its business in the fig tree. I stayed in that bath for 45 minutes. I had earned it. Beverly and Jerome were gone by Thursday, one day ahead of my deadline, which I noted and appreciated in the same way I appreciate any numbers that come in under budget. Jerome I had never met before that Friday. He appeared briefly in the hallway while Beverly was carrying boxes. A quiet man, slightly embarrassed, who nodded at me and said, "Ma'am," and carried things to the car without being asked twice. I held no grievance toward Jerome. He had walked through a door that was held open for him, and when told the door was closing, he walked back out. That is all anyone can be asked to do. Marcus never arrived. Whatever plans had been made for the garage conversion ended when I walked through my own front door 12 days early with a manila envelope and 34 years of documentation. I heard from Vera that the storage company quote was canceled the same afternoon I came home. She knows this because she knows people who know things, which is one of the many reasons I have kept Vera Cousins next door to me for 22 years. Terrell signed the lease on a Sunday. He came to me in the kitchen that morning, not Candace, Terrell, alone, and sat down across the table the way he had sat across from me his whole life and put the signed papers on the table between us. His face was tired, not angry. Tired in the way of a man who has been carrying something heavy and has finally set it down and is not sure yet whether he is relieved or ashamed or both. "I didn't think it through," he said. I looked at my son. "I know," I said. It's not an excuse." "No," I said. "It isn't." He was quiet for a moment. His hands were flat on the table. Raymond's hands. The same shape, the same width across the knuckles. "Are you going to tell Damon?" he said. "I already did." He closed his eyes briefly. "How'd that go?" "About how you'd expect." He nodded. He picked up his coffee cup and held it with both hands and stared at the surface of it. "I'm sorry, Mama." I looked at my son for a long moment. The morning light was in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. "I know you are," I said. "We'll figure out the rest as we go." That was all. That was enough. Not because the wound was closed, but because some things are too large and too old and too tangled with love to settle in a single conversation. We would talk more over time. We would be careful with each other for a while. Things would be different. But he was still my son, and I was still his mother. And we were still in my kitchen on Clement Street, which was mine and had always been mine and would remain so. Some facts are load-bearing. 3 weeks later, the house was quiet in the way I like. Not empty, quiet. There is a difference that takes some people years to understand and some people never do. Empty is absence. Quiet is a house that is fully itself, settled into its own rhythms, not performing anything for anyone. Terrell and Candace had an apartment on the other side of town. Edgewood, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building with a gym and a rooftop deck, and the kind of finishes Candace had always wanted. I knew this because Terrell told me when he called to say they'd found a place. His voice was careful the way it gets when he is trying to read how I am receiving something. I told him it sounded like a good fit. He said he thought so too. We talked for a while after that. Not about any of it. Just talked. The way we used to before things got complicated. He told me about a new client he'd signed. I told him about the kayaking in St. John, the guide named Caleb, the coves with the green water. He laughed when I described my arms being sore for 2 days. "You went kayaking?" "I did," I said. "Mama." A pause. Something warm in his voice. Real and uncomplicated for the first time in a while. Look at you. Damon called the Sunday after Terrell and Candace moved out. He knew the broad shape of what had happened. I had told him the week I came home, plainly and completely, the way I tell Damon things. He had gone quiet in the way he goes quiet when he is angry on my behalf, which is a particular kind of quiet that sounds like restraint under significant pressure. He had wanted to fly in. I had told him it was handled. "You sure?" he said. "I had a good attorney and a good neighbor," I said. "It's handled." He was quiet again. Then, "You doing all right? For real?" I thought about that balcony, the layered blue of the Caribbean, the rum cake I ate at a small table with the harbor in front of me, the 45-minute bath with the eucalyptus salts while the house reckoned with itself 3 floors below. "I'm all right," I said. "Oh, for real. Patricia wants to come for Christmas." "Tell her to come," I said. "I'll make the whole spread. Sweet potato pie, mac and cheese, the works. She's going to hold you to that." "She should," I said. The lease check came on the 1st of the month. Direct deposit. Candace had set it up, which I noted as a small and telling detail. Whatever Terrell felt about the arrangement, Candace had moved into it with the efficiency she brought to everything. I found I did not resent her for it. She was who she was. She had always been who she was. I had simply, for a period of time, chosen to see only the parts that were easiest to look at. I deposited the check. I moved a portion of it into the savings account I keep for the house. Maintenance, the porch repainting I had been putting off, the rose bushes that needed new soil in spring. The house costs what it costs. I have always known how to make those numbers work. The rest I put toward a trip. Vera had mentioned the Pacific Coast. She had a cousin in Portland who had been asking her to visit for 2 years. I had never been to Oregon. I had never seen the Pacific Ocean, which struck me, standing in my kitchen on a Thursday morning, as a thing that should be corrected. I called Vera. "How do you feel about Oregon in the spring?" I said. A pause. Then, in the voice of a woman who has been waiting to be asked, I feel like I need to call my cousin. Beverly's reading glasses had been left on the side table. I found them the morning after everyone cleared out, sitting exactly where they had been the day Beverly walked out of Raymond's chair and told me how comfortable it was. Small wire frames, the kind with the slight magnification at the bottom for close reading. Practical glasses. Nothing fancy. I put them in a small, padded envelope with Beverly's name on it and gave them to Terrell the next time he came by. He took them without comment. His ears went slightly pink, the way they do when he is embarrassed, which they have done since he was 5 years old and have never once not done, regardless of how old he gets. I did not say anything about it. There was nothing to say. The glasses needed to get back to their owner. That was all. Raymond's chair is back where it belongs. I moved the throw blanket Candace had left on it. A gray woven thing, very soft. The kind you find in these home stores where everything costs more than it looks like it should. I folded it neatly and set it in the hall closet. I did not throw it away. It's a good blanket. It is simply not Raymond's chair's blanket. I sat in it that first evening alone, the way I had not let myself sit in it while the house was full of other people's plans. The worn patch on the left armrest, exactly where it has always been. The particular way the cushion takes your weight, yielding but not soft. The posture of something that has held a lot of people for a long time and knows how to do it. The 4 o'clock light came through the window and laid its stripe across the floor. I put my foot in it, sat there for a while. The house breathed around me. The refrigerator, the settling walls, the faint creak of the back porch in the wind. All the sounds I know by name. I put Raymond's Marvin Gaye records back on the turntable the following Sunday. I had put them away when Terrell and Candace moved in. Not because anyone had asked me to, but because I had not wanted to be a woman listening to her dead husband's records in front of people who were always slightly too busy to sit still. There is a kind of grief that is private, not because you are ashamed of it, but because it belongs to you and you are not interested in offering it up for anyone else to hold. I took the records out of the cabinet. I put the first one on. I stood in the kitchen while the needle found the groove, and that sound came. That warm, slightly imperfect analog sound that no digital recording has ever fully replicated. The sound of something being played in real time, in a real room by real people who are no longer living. I made a full breakfast while it played. Biscuits from scratch, smothered pork chops, cheesy scrambled eggs, cornbread in the cast iron skillet. The whole house smelled like butter and something warm. I set one place at the table, mine. I sat down and I ate every bit of it. The fig tree is putting out new growth at the tips of its branches. This time of year, it is not fruiting. That comes in late summer, the heavy bending season, the season that smells like the yard is breathing. But the new growth is there if you look for it, small and bright green at the ends of the darker branches, the tree doing what it does without being asked. 34 years in the ground, longer than some marriages, longer than most things that are supposed to last. Raymond patted the dirt around its base with both hands, flat-palmed, careful. The way you settle something you mean to keep. He said, "We can make something here." We did. I am still here. So is the tree. So is the house on Clement Street, with its brick front and its rose bushes and its kitchen floor. I tiled myself and the light that comes through the window at 4 in the afternoon and lands in a stripe I have stepped over and into for 36 years. My name is Dolores Fay Whitman. I am 71 years old. I have outlasted a mortgage, a grief, a plot I was not supposed to discover, and a cruise that was meant to be a removal. I sit in Raymond's chair in the late afternoons now. I read. I drink my tea. I listen to the house settle around me. Sometimes I think about what Terrell wrote in that email. She'll be so relaxed she won't want to come back. I went. I was relaxed. The water was that particular layered blue. The rum cake was worth buying twice. The mornings on the balcony were genuinely beautiful, and I am genuinely glad I had them. And then I came home. Because this is my home. It has always been my home. And some things, the right things, the things worth building, do not require you to raise your voice to keep them. You just have to know exactly what you own and never forget whose name is on it. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to know what Dolores did with the lease money next, that story is already coming.